Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm going to tell you all about Tyranitar. Now, the previous video that I did was all about Vespiquen, and it went down fairly well. The reaction was good, people liked it, and most importantly, it opened up a fun little discussion, which was the point of the video. So I thought it might be a little bit of fun to do a very similar thing again today. But today we are going to be looking at Tyranitar, or more importantly, Tyranitar, the Mega version. Now, when I did my top 10 cards of Ancient Origins, a video I highly encourage you to check out, I will post a link in the description of this particular video, I talked about Tyranitar. I made him my, spoiler alert, number 3 card. And that didn't necessarily, people didn't agree, and I encouraged people in that video to give me their top 10. And nobody else who gave a top 10 put Tyranitar or Mega Tyranitar into their top 10. Nobody else agreed with me that it was a, frankly, fantastic card. I can't be mad at them for that. They just didn't get much agreement. I'm going to be looking today essentially at why I believe it was the best card, or the third best card, and how you can go about making a deck with it. Again, just like in the previous video, I am talking about how to make a deck with it, rather than just the card itself. So we start off with regular Tyranitar EX. There is nothing particularly special. I don't like the fighting weakness. You know, it is a fairly standard resistance to Psychic, standard 180 HP. Both the attacks are very meh. Hammer in for 60 damage for 3 energy, Ground Break 140 for 4 energy, 10 damage to each of your bench. It's not good enough. But now let's have a look at Mega Tyranitar. Now he is a Mega EX, which means you have to spend an extra turn evolving him. But we do have the Spirit Link card, like we always do for these Mega EXs. Or at least we do after a certain point, which means you don't have to end your turn to evolve him if you've got the Spirit Link on him. More importantly, he has an Ancient Trait Theta Double. This Pokemon can have 2 Pokemon tools attached to it. Now we're talking, ladies and gentlemen, because he needs the Spirit Link. Everybody needs the Spirit Link. All Mega EXs need the Spirit Link. But he can have another tool as well. He can also have something like a Muscle Band, although for my personal preference here, I'm going to be going for Weakness Policy. All will be revealed as we go through this video. And 240 HP is not to be sniffed at, but it's the attack that really makes me excited about Mega Tyranitar. Destroyer King, 110 damage for 4 energy. It's even worse than the regular. 60 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active. That means if they've got 1 damage counter on, you're doing 170. If they have got 2 damage counters on, you're doing 230. But remember that they will already have 2 damage counters on, which will put them to a total of 250 damage, and they will be KO'd. This attack, as long as you can get 2 damage on anything, you are going to get... You're going to knock anything out here. This will KO a Wailord in 1 hit. Now, there are some downsides. We'll get to them in a minute, like the attack cost and all of that. But I suppose the logical starting point now is to talk about how to get the damage on. Now, there are really 4 ways, and these are the most efficient ways for me. Now, my personal second favourite Pokemon way, and I don't think it's the best way at all, but we have got Forretress. Or however you want to pronounce it, Forretress. You can, you can go where you like with that. But this Forretress card essentially allows you to do 10 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon when you evolve him up. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty gosh darn good. The problem is, if you put 10 damage, that's putting him up to 170. Well, the attack does 170, they'll be on 180, but of course that's not actually good enough because that's not going to get the damage done. It is the Flash Fire Forretress. If you're going against regular EXs, this will be fine. The attack will do 170, they will be on 180 in total. You are sorted. The problem is 180 is only good enough 4 EXs, not Mega EXs. You ain't KOing any Mega EXs in one hit with this attack. And for reasons we're going to see more and more as we go through the video, you're going to need to be one-hit KOing for this deck to really take advantage. Now that's fine, you can just use 2 Forretress, but then your opponent can heal all the rest of their Pokemon. They can use things, they can even use something like Potion, but Fresh Water Set would be absolutely horrific if your opponent used it against you here. That would not do very well at all. Freshwater Set, remember, came out in Primal Clash and deals 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. So you can heal the damage, you can Forretress twice, get 1 KO, and then your opponent can heal everything with Freshwater Set. Or if they're playing a Water or Lightning deck, they can use Rough Seas to heal off all of their Pokemon. So I don't like either of them as much as I like using Golbat and Crobat. Now, Golbat has the attack Sneaky Bite. You evolve him up, you put 20 damage counters on one Pokemon. Now you're one-hit KOing. And you've got Crobat. When you evolve, you put 30 damage with Surprise Bite or 3 damage counters. And then you're doing a quite ludicrous 290 to put them on 320 in total. It is quite frankly ridiculous. You'll be doing 180 plus the 110 is 290 and another 30 on, so that literally is 320 damage. Now, a lot of people have said, oh, well, I'm just going to play, a free Crobat line, I'm not going to play any Golbat. I am a fan of playing Crobat and Golbat in this deck for one very simple reason. Firstly, bench space. You are going to want bench Pokemon out, and you're going to be running out of bench space if you put down too many Golbats. But also, if I want a Golbat, if I've got a Golbat down and I want another Golbat, I've got to bench a Zubat, wait a turn, evolve it into a Golbat. If I've got a Golbat down and I want to use a Crobat, I evolve it into a Crobat. I think using a 2-2-2 line here would be better than running a free line. Although, of course, if you're running a free line, then you're more likely to run into your Zubats and then your Golbats, so maybe there's an advantage there. Certainly something to be sorted in testing. But I wanted to just, remind you guys of that. Now, there are a couple of stadiums you could use. You can use Faded Town, puts 2 damage counters on Mega EXs in between turns. 2 reasons I'm not a huge fan of this. Firstly, you're putting damage on yourself, because you will be a Mega EX. Secondly, it's only going to work against Mega EX decks, and there's an awful lot of decks that won't be. Now, one you could use instead is Team Magma's Secret Base. Now, this I am a fan of. Whenever any player puts a Pokemon, except for a Team Magma Pokemon, from his or her hand onto his or her bench, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. I still don't like this as good as Golbat or Crobat, but I don't think now in Expanded, you've got the Shadow Circle stadium you may wish to use to give yourself free retreat, but in Standard there is no real stadium you need to use. Now, obviously there are some that will be useful, but there's no stadium you need to use here, so putting a couple of these could be kind of useful. Put it down at the end of your turn, see if you can bait your opponent into benching a Pokemon. They can always not bench their Pokemon for a turn or two, but okay, that means they're not benching Pokemon they want to bench. That's giving you an advantage. The other thing, of course, is if you put down that stadium, your opponent can just play a stadium of their own and get around it. Or they can play a Pokemon, take the damage, and then heal it. So it's not quite as good. I like Golbat because you play it and then you attack, rather than hoping the damage is still there on the next turn, like you would with Forretress or with Team Magma's Secret Hideout. So let's have a look at some of the support Pokemon we can use here. And obviously Golbat, Crobat, Forretress are down. One support Pokemon I like is Absol. Now, Absol's a weird kind of Pokemon because it's a very weird way of thinking about it, and not every player that I've seen has picked up on this. It's from Roaring Skies, and it's got the ability Cursed Eyes. And you can move 3 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another of his Pokemon. Now, this is, again, it's quite a convoluted plan, but if your opponent has got some damage on the field, you can play Absol, move the damage over, and then immediately attack with Tyranitar to get the KO. That's pretty gosh darned useful. And you can even combine this with Forretress to, put 10 damage on everything and then move the damage, to maybe they heal one of the Pokemon, you can move it with Absol. I am quite a fan of this Pokemon. I like it, quite frankly. You can also, of course, just attack with Tyranitar and then move the damage with Absol. Or indeed attack with Yveltal, more on him in a second, and then move the damage with Absol. I wouldn't put more than 1 or 2 of him in the deck, because so much needs to go right for him to work. He's also turned off by all of the ability blockers. So Garbodor, if you're playing an expanded, and Silent Lab, and Wobbuffet, because he is a basic non-psychic type, they will all turn off Absol's ability here. So, whereas Wobbuffet is not going to turn off your Crobat, your Golbat, because they are psychic Pokemon, and Silent Lab is going to turn off neither Forretress nor Golbat Crobat, because none of them are basic Pokemon. So things to bear in mind with Absol. But the other support Pokemon, the Pokemon that should really fill out the rest of your Pokemon line, the Yveltals. Now, regular Yveltal is absolutely brilliant. He's a bulky non-EX, and that means that you can make your opponent play a 7-prize game, i.e. you make your opponent knock out 1 non-EX, and then they've got to win the game by knocking out an EX. When they've got 1 prize left, they've taken 7 prizes. But he's got the ability Oblivion Wing. The attack Oblivion Wing. 30 damage, not bad for 1 energy, but you get to attach a dark energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. And let's not forget the not insignificant attack cost of Tyranitar here. This can be really, really useful for building up your Tyranitar while putting some damage on the field. So, you could sit there and do 30 with Yveltal, maybe get lucky enough to get a turn 2 Tyranitar, and then you can drop an Absol to move the damage from whatever you hit to whatever's in the active to kill with Tyranitar. You see where I'm going with this? It puts damage on the field and it accelerates energy. It's also a non-EX, so if you come across a safeguarding Pokemon, maybe something like Beautifly in the new format, Yveltal can help you get through that, whereas Tyranitar is, of course, an EX. The other Pokemon I like is Yveltal EX. He's just good. He's always been good. Now, the one thing we must remember about Yveltal, he has a different weakness to Tyranitar. He's weak to lightning, not to fighting. So if you're against a fighting deck, Yveltal will he will resist it rather than be weak to it, so he will cover your weakness. But also, Evil Ball's just a really gosh darned good attack. So don't be sleeping on the Yveltals. And then a Pokemon, now I'm not saying you can't use any other Pokemon in here, but I am saying that Yveltal, Yveltal EX, and Absol are the other real support Pokemon, outside of if you're using your Bats or your Forretress to, get the damage down there. So let's finish off by looking at some of the problems of this deck. Some of the things, I've told you what it is and how it works. Essentially with this deck, there are some problems, so let's have a look. We'll start with one we've already talked about, healing. Healing is a pain in the neck. If you do the damage and then attack in the same turn, i.e. you evolve into a Golbat and then do the attack, you're absolutely sorted. But if you want to do the damage with Yveltal and then attack with Tyranitar, well, your opponent can heal. I mean, if Tyranitar ever got big, people would start putting fresh water set into their decks for this very reason. But all water and lightning decks, 95% of them, are going to be putting Rough Seas in, especially now that Seismitoad no longer needs Burbank City Gym because Hypnotoxic Laser is rotated. In standard format, they are going to be playing Rough Seas to do all of that healing. So, if you play against a healing deck, it's not the end of the world. Well, it is if you're playing something like the Forretress build, because your opponent's just going to heal all the damage off before you can ever really take advantage of it. But you're going to have to play very, very carefully. If you're playing the Bats build, which I still believe is the best one for the time being, you're going to have to do the ability and then the attack straight away. Secondly, the weakness. Let's face it, you're weak to fighting. In Expanded, you've got things like Landorus. He's not in Standard, he's been rotated, but you've still got Lucario, who's pretty gosh darn good. Everyone's talking about Machamp. I don't think he's going to be terribly good, but if people play it, you're going to be weak to it. And there's a combo that I'm a big fan of, and that is Hawlucha Silent Lab. Hawlucha does 60 damage for 1 energy, Silent Lab turns off his ability that he doesn't hit for weakness, now you're doing 120 for 1 energy to a Tyranitar with a non-EX. It's something to look out for. I don't think fighting is going to be the worst weakness in the format, but I think it's one you should be looking out for. The biggest problem with Tyranitar is the attack cost, because let's face it, if you are able to be attacking with Tyranitar consistently, you will win. If every turn you can go Golbat Tyranitar or Crobat Tyranitar, you are going to win your game. It's going to happen. I mean, of course, first you've got the problem of getting the Golbats and Crobats out, but that's really just a consistency problem that you should be covering by good deck building. The attack cost, there is 4, but we've got help here. First of all, we've got the non-EX Yveltal. Hide behind him for a turn or 2 while you do your attack. By the way, I should have mentioned a second ago, if you're playing with a weakness, I have already mentioned this, but I would like to reiterate, you've got Fate Double, you can use 2 tools, so you can use Weakness Policy. But going back to the attack cost, we've got Baby Yveltal. He can help you to accelerate energy while you sit there and attack. You've also got double colourless energy, because the attack cost is dark, colourless, colourless. And you've got Mega Turbo, which allows you to attach one of your dark from your discard pile to one of your Mega Pokemon. In Expanded, you've actually got one more option, and that is that you've got Dark Patch, which will only allow you to attach to the bench, not the active, like Mega Turbo will, but will allow you to attach to Tyranitar when he's not been Mega Evolved, and will allow you to accelerate energy onto Yveltal EX as well as onto Tyranitar. And let's not forget that in Expanded you've also got Sableye, whose Junk Hunt attack can be really, really useful for reusing those trainers. So something to bear in mind. I am a big fan of this deck. Now, it's going to be difficult to get a consistent list where you get your Mega with 4 energy and your Bats out. You've got a not insignificant weakness, and of course decks that heal can slow you down. But I genuinely believe that someone out there is going to make a very consistent version of this deck that sets up all the time and is going to completely own. Now, I'm recording this on Monday the 24th of August 2015. Yesterday we all saw Blastoise win Worlds. Well, hang on a second. In order to get the Blastoise deck working, you have to have Archie's Ace in the Hole as the only card in your hand, while you've got a Blastoise in the discard pile, then you've got to have a Caldeo on the bench, and you've got to have 4 energy in order to start attacking, blah, blah, blah. Well, he got all the way in one world by making that consistent. You telling me you can't get a Mega EX with 4 energy and a stage 1? I think you can, ladies and gentlemen. Now, once again, I'm not giving you a deck list in this video. This video is not about giving a deck list. If you think you've got a good deck list, please share it in the comments. If you think there are any other support Pokemon that are good that I've missed, stick it in the comments. Or if you just want to tell me what you think of Tyranitar, stick it down there in the comments. This video is supposed to be getting you thinking about the deck, explaining how it works, and telling you about the problems to look out for, rather than just, hey, here's a deck, play it. Because if you just net deck lists, you're not going to be as successful as someone who really understands a deck and plays it well. As always, thank you very much for watching this. Make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe, and if you've already done so, get a friend to subscribe. Check out some of my other videos, there are some absolute doozies. I should hopefully have links to a couple of them in the description of this video. And of course, check out my video game channel, Wassy Plays. It's just like this, but it's for video games, and I have a sneaking suspicion, ladies and gentlemen, that if you try it, you just might like it. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.